It was just past 3 in the morning when Karen, emboldened by her sense of authority, decided to escalate her campaign of intimidation yet again. She arrived at my door, rattling the handle with the master key she claimed entitled her to entry. Her footsteps thudded ominously across the porch, echoing in the darkness, a predator convinced of her dominance. I had dealt with her schemes before, but this was different. It was personal, invasive, and timed for maximum intimidation. I had anticipated such a move. Months of HOA harassment had taught me that Karen's actions often followed a predictable pattern: late-night threats, overreach, and attempts to exploit perceived weaknesses. That night, I wasn't about to be the victim of her theatrics. My house was not just a residence, it was a fortress. Security cameras captured her every move, motion sensors tracked her approach, and my K9s, loyal and well-trained, were already alert. As Karen's hand rattled the door, my 2 Rottweilers emerged from the shadows, muscles tensed, eyes gleaming in the porch light. They were more than pets. They were a deterrent, trained not to harm innocent visitors but to respond immediately to intruders. Karen, confident and arrogant, hadn't accounted for them. The moment she tried to force the door, they let out a deep, intimidating growl that filled the air with authority. Inside, I monitored the situation calmly, my hand hovering near the control panel that allowed me to activate additional security measures if necessary. I didn't need to panic. Karen had walked right into a trap she didn't see coming. Every decision she had made assumed she would intimidate me into compliance, but she had underestimated the preparation, foresight, and resources I had put in place. Karen continued to yell, calling my name, demanding entry, and citing HOA rules that had no jurisdiction here. Her voice carried, piercing the quiet night, but the Rottweiler's presence made it clear she was not welcome. She could not open the door, and she could not intimidate the defenders she faced. The growls, teeth, and sheer size of the dogs created a psychological barrier stronger than any locked door. Neighbors, briefly stirred awake by the commotion, reported hearing the tense standoff from the street. The impression left on them was unmistakable. Karen, usually the self-proclaimed enforcer of cedar pines, was helpless outside my gate. The authority she wielded during daylight hours vanished in the face of preparation, discipline, and natural deterrence. Inside, I decided to add another layer of control. Using my security system, I activated additional exterior lights, illuminating the yard and leaving no shadow for Karen to hide behind. Cameras captured her every move, while the dog's eyes followed her, unblinking, warning her to retreat. Every instinct she relied on to assert dominance had failed. She was exposed, isolated, and utterly powerless. For 30 tense minutes, the confrontation continued. Karen called for backup, phoned the HOA board, and even tried threatening me over the phone. But the system I had in place intercepted each call, logging it for potential evidence. By the time she realized that no one would intervene on her behalf, exhaustion and frustration had replaced her initial rage. She had expected a quick victory, a display of fear that would cement her authority, but instead, she faced the consequences of her own hubris. Finally, she retreated. Her hand slipped from the doorknob, and her voice, once so commanding, became muttered threats fading into the night. The Rottweilers, ever disciplined, relaxed only after she was off the property, demonstrating that their purpose was to enforce boundaries, not provoke unnecessary conflict. The aftermath was immediate. Neighbors, now fully aware of Karen's intrusion and her failure, began questioning her authority and the tactics she used. Her aura of invincibility cracked. She was no longer the untouchable HOA queen, but a figure whose aggression and entitlement had met real resistance. The incident spread quietly through the community, leaving Karen to stew in the public perception of her defeat. That morning, I inspected the gate, checked the security footage, and reinforced my systems for future incidents. Every detail mattered: motion sensors, camera angles, dog patrol schedules. Karen had walked into a situation she thought she controlled, only to find herself trapped by the very rules of preparation she had ignored. By the end of the day, it was clear. Cedar Pines had witnessed a turning point. Karen could try to wield authority, but she could no longer assume fear would grant her compliance. My K9s, my planning, and my calm readiness had transformed a potential disaster into a clear message. Trespassers, even those claiming power, would meet consequences calculated, controlled, and impossible to ignore. Karen's failed intrusion wasn't just a personal victory, it was a community-wide statement. From that night forward, the boundaries were no longer just legal or physical. They were psychological. Cedar Pines learned that preparation, vigilance, and decisive action could dismantle even the most audacious attempts at control, and Karen, for the first time, realized that her influence had limits she could not overcome.